light system, you really quickly realize a very different aspect of learning. Yeah, you can create questions and then you're learning and stuff, but really, really quickly into the process, you realize that there's just a fundamental difference in this very particular thing, and that is the order in which you learn the material. And this becomes very confusing. And it's very understandable. Normally, when you're learning, it goes something like this. We have information, let's say it's just information on the page, and we learn in this order where we start from the top and we just keep going like this. And we go from page 1 all the way through to page, N, whatever it is, and we just keep going page by page, line by line, and it's what we call is very linear. And this linear way of learning, again, is something that's quite artificial. And instead, when you learn through the traffic light system, which, by the way, the traffic light system is not so much like a full system of study. It's more like a drill that you do to practice the technique. So once you get good at this, you're not going to need something like traffic light system. This is purely just to train your brain to be able to do this. If you can't even do the traffic light system, then you need to do that until it's more comfortable. But if you're finding that that's a little bit more comfortable, then that just means you're ready to move on. But when you use the traffic light system, you realize that, okay, because you're starting with having these questions that you're curious about, you then will say, okay, well, look, I've got these questions that I want to answer. And then a number of sort of sub-questions come up, okay? What is the right order in which we need to be actually going through these questions? And when I go to answer these questions, like, what if it's in the third page of the book and it's not in the order that it's laid out to me? How am I meant to kind of put that together in my mind? Well, here's the thing is that if you think about a textbook or a course guide or even your teacher teaching you something, right? They may say that it goes in this order, number 1, and then number 2, and then number 3, and then number 4. That might be the order that it's laid out to you in. And the author of the book or your teacher or whoever it is, they're thinking, okay, what's the best order in which to teach this subject to the student? But here's the thing. The way that you learn is fundamentally dictated by what you already know. So, as a really easy example, if someone has never learned chemistry ever before, then learning the final year of high school chemistry as the very first thing they ever learn is going to be probably a little bit more challenging compared to learning just about what is an atom to begin with. So there's obviously some kind of order there. But even more than that, let's say that you're a really avid hockey player, but the way that particles collide in chemical reactions to create the reaction, maybe that concept reminds you of the maybe type of dynamic that you get when you're playing hockey. And I know that's a weird connection to make, but for some people, that may be a way that allows them to actually understand something else. They can create an analogy for learning using other things that aren't directly related to that particular topic. And actually, that's actually called analogous relationships and analogous learning. So using analogous relationships is part of the toolkit of an adept learner, is that they're able to take what they already know in potentially unrelated fields and create analogies so that they can apply them to new information and therefore speed up their rate of learning for a new topic. So obviously, if you have a lot of analogies that you can potentially apply and a lot of things to draw on, then it's actually faster for you to learn different things. And actually, that is something that's found, is that people that have generally more interests and more hobbies and things, they overall tend to be able to learn faster in any subject because they're able to apply so many different ways of thinking to it and create so many analogies. But the idea is that your teacher or the author of this book, they don't actually know you. They're a stranger. And so they don't know what you know. So they don't know in which order your brain is going to make sense of it the most, right? For all you know, your brain might learn it better by going through number 2 first, and then going through half of number 1, and then going back to number 2, and then doing the second half of number 1, then going to 4, and then finishing at 3. Your particular unique brain, based on what you know, might decide that this order is actually better and makes more sense for you than the order in which the textbook or the course guide or the teacher laid it out to you, which may be the standard order. So it doesn't actually make any sense to force yourself to learn it in someone else's order when your brain is telling you that you should learn it in a different way. So this is actually something that we call order control. And order control is another one of those basic skills and mindsets that we need to just completely develop and just have as a very firm foundation. So order control means that we are the one that's in control of our order. We learn it in the order that makes sense for us. If we want to do page 2, paragraph 2, and then go back to page 1 and then jump to page 3, because that's how it makes sense for us, then that's how we should do it. So the question is now, how do we make the order the right order for us? How do we know what is our best order, right? We can agree that we're almost always going to have to change the order, because there's really never going to be a situation where someone explains something to you in exactly the best order for you to learn it. So in virtually every situation, you are always going to have to change the order at least a little bit, and often a lot. So how do we actually know how to change the order? How do we pick the order? The order is picked based on the questions that we're asking. The order is based on the questions that we're asking. So this curiosity is our brain's way of saying, hey, this is what we want to know. Okay? If you're curious about it, it's what we want to know. So by answering this and satiating your curiosity, you are deciding that that's the order. So if you start a new topic and the first question you have is, so let's take an example. Again, we'll build off the idea that you read a novel and you need to do a literary analysis on the techniques that we used. You might read this novel, and the first thing that you're thinking is, well, if you're not used to this, you're not thinking anything, you're just reading it just with a completely passive and dull mind. But hopefully when you practice this, you'll say, okay, few questions. Okay, what's the basic theme of this novel? Why did the author choose to express this theme? And maybe how did they choose to express this theme in terms of what characters or events or plot devices did they use? Those might be the questions you have in your mind. If those are the questions, and the first one you want to answer is, what are the themes about this text? Then actually, you might actually go through this novel, and instead of reading it from beginning to end, you might actually read the blurb first or the author's notes. You might even go and read reviews about this first. You might even read someone else's essay explaining the themes about it before you even read it yourself. And that will be perfectly okay if that's the order that you wanted. For something like a science subject, let's say that you were learning about waves again in physics, and you have a course guide that says waves as a heading at the very top, and then underneath that it says diffraction. Then as soon as you read the word waves, it may only be one word, but it's a heading. So you might think to yourself, okay, so we're now learning a topic about waves. So what do I want to know first? What's the question in my mind? Is it about diffraction? No, because I don't even know what diffraction is at this point. I don't even know what waves are at this point, and I don't know why I need to care about either of those things. So even going from the word waves to diffraction, it's already too much of a jump. So we need to pick our order. We need to say, okay, waves. What is a wave and why is it important? And that might be on page 3. So we would go to page 3 and would read, what is a wave? Oh, this is what a wave is. Okay, well, why is it important? Maybe it's not in the guide. We can quickly Google it. Why do we need to know about waves? You could just Google that. Or how are waves used in real life? And you'll get an understanding. Oh, so this is the study about all of these different things. You can see all the different applications of this knowledge. Great, our questions are answered. Now what do we want to know? Well, at this stage, to be honest, I'm a little bit curious about what that diffraction thing was and how that's relevant to this topic of waves. So I can go back to that point where I left off, read diffraction, and think, okay, so what are my questions now? What is diffraction? Why is it important? And how does it relate to waves? So I'd answer those questions. And the next thing I might say is, well, what's my next topic? Maybe it's about refraction. Maybe it's about a specific paragraph that was in that diffraction subchapter that we want to dive into a little bit more deeply. So when we're doing it this way, it almost feels like we're not studying, but actually we're learning a lot. We're learning about waves, we're learning about why it's important, we're learning about diffraction, what it is, why it's important, how to use it, and we're creating relationships between all of them constantly as we go. And this is the thing that really trips people up, is that, and I don't know if this is irony or not, but people often, when they start using the correct order for the first time, feel like they're not studying properly because it suddenly becomes much easier to understand the information. So easy, in fact, that it just feels too obvious. They feel like studying requires a lot of just trying to figure this out and just grinding through the material and just ramming in definitions and trying to memorize it as they go. But when you do the right order, you realize that actually, hey, now that I think back on everything that I've learned for the last hour, I actually have a pretty good understanding of this topic now. I don't have all the details, but a lot of the big information that would have normally taken me hours, I've actually done that. And that's just by using the right order control. So order control, again, is one of those fundamental skills that every adept learner needs to have. And by not using order control to our advantage, it's kind of like if you were to bake a cake and the ingredients say, okay, well, first of all, put the cake mix in, and then number 2, add in the eggs, then you might think, okay, well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to add in the eggs first, and then I'm going to put that in the oven, and then I'll add the cake mix in after that. So you might have swapped in just a couple things in the order, but not doing in the right order means that the entire thing is a very different outcome. It really doesn't make sense. The difference is that we need to not assume that the order that it was given to us is the right order, because the right order is in our own brains. We are the one that decides the right order. So by deciding not to rearrange it in a way that makes sense for us, we are actually the one that is deciding to put the eggs in the oven and pour the cake mix on the floor. And again, we actually understand this at an intuitive level. If someone explains something to you in an out of order fashion, it's very hard to understand. So if I were to explain, let's say, this mug that I've got right here to you, and if you were to close your eyes, in fact, let's just do this. Close your eyes right now. And I'm going to describe this cup to you. It is approximately 5 centimeters in diameter at the top, made of a plastic material with a lip opening, which is oval in shape, approximately 1.5 to 2 centimeters wide by 7 millimeters in length, with a rotating, swiveling top, which is approximately 2 to 3 millimeters in thickness, which is joined to a metal rim, which seems to be made out of potentially a brushed aluminium, which is also attached to a plastic black handle sticking out at an angle of probably about 89 degrees. So you can see already, if you didn't know that I was talking about a cup, you probably would not be able to put that image together. But everything I was saying was accurate. And if I kept explaining for about the next 2 hours, you would understand that I'm talking about a cup. But you see how hard it is to really form a good image about what it is that I'm trying to say. This is the power of order control. I can explain the same thing, but in the reverse order in a way that just makes a bit more sense. So I could say, in my hand, I've got something that helps me drink water. It's empty on the inside and it functions as a container. There's an area for me to drink out of at the top, and the bottom is completely sealed so that water isn't leaking out. There's a handle on the side as well. The top has a lid, and the lid is black. This lid is 5 centimeters in diameter, made of plastic, and has an oval opening, which is about 1.5 centimeters wide and 7 millimeters in length. So you can see how the exact same details put in a different order is much easier to understand. In fact, let me take this one step further and show how this order control even goes to something visual. So if I were to draw something here, guess what it is that I'm trying to draw? By now, you're probably confused. Let me try that again. I'm going to draw something now. I'm actually going to draw exactly the same thing, but I want you to tell me as soon as you know what it is that I'm drawing. So hopefully, if my drawing wasn't too bad, you realize that what I'm drawing is a tree. And what I drew before, those are the leaves on the tree. So again, the exact same thing, but by starting at the bottom and the trunk and moving my way up, I've been able to show the most important part of this, which is the overall shape, rather than starting at the leaves and coming in. But the thing is, when we read a course guide and we learn stuff, we often focus in on those leaves. We focus on memorizing every individual little fact and statistic and detail and quote and enzyme and reaction and catalyst, and every single little detail that we spend trying to memorize is taking away from time that we could be spending understanding that this is fundamentally a tree with branches that go in this direction, and this direction. So there's clearly an order in which things make more sense. However, that order is almost always opposite. We're often tied up with a lot of these details when we have no business learning those until the very end when it naturally makes sense. After all, a leaf only exists somewhere because the branch led to it, and that branch is only there because of the stem. If you know where the main stem and trunk were, then you know where the branches stem out from, and you know where the twigs are, and therefore the leaves naturally should be around there. And so you don't even have to memorize it anymore. So when you're using the traffic light system and just training your brain to go from curiosity, thinking about things, then going in and diving into the material to find information, thinking about it, relating to it, thinking of more questions, diving in again in that cycle of thinking and questioning and then seeking and taking and gathering. When we're training this with a traffic light system, don't be afraid of going out of order. I think you'll be surprised to find that when you stop holding yourself back from going out of order, you actually find the best order for you to learn in. And honestly, for myself, I don't even remember the last time I learned something in the order that was given to me. It's just so inefficient that I couldn't bring myself to do it because it would just be such an enormous waste of time. And this is one of the big differences that I see with adept learners and low-level learners is that low-level learners have this very irrational fixation on learning it in the order that it was given to them. Whereas high-level learners are able to kind of break away from that and say, look, this is what I need to know. I'm going to go find that. And they learn that and they just continue that process again and again. So this is one of those basic skills that we want to really polish down before we start transforming this and putting them into even different systems that can potentially be even more efficient.